Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Ashley Adams, and thank you so much for joining me at Strengths Not Strikes Virtual Summit. Thank you to Black and in Grad School for this awesome opportunity to speak to new and prospective and folks that are considering graduate school. I'm really thrilled to be here, and I'm excited to talk to y'all for the next hour or so about lasting beyond the lecture and graduate school success strategies. I am the director of student affairs at a Research One institution in Pennsylvania, Penn State University, and I'm also a graduate faculty in our College of Education. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation and be able to talk to folks about my own experience as a graduate student and being successful, as well as what I've learned as a graduate faculty member. So I want to let you know that you can feel free to ask questions throughout today's presentation. Don't feel like you got to wait to the end. I definitely want to hear from you. So definitely ask questions as you are going. You can ask questions on social. You can type them in the chat. I'll be monitoring that as we go through today's presentation. So please be sure to ask questions at any time and just know that I'm here to help. So I'm looking forward to connecting with you. So you might be wondering, who am I and how I came to this conversation. So I'm a PhD in higher education administration. I earned my doctoral degree in 2015 from St. Louis University, that's SLU in St. Louis, Missouri. I'd worked in higher education for over 8 years, and I've just always been really passionate about the next thing that I am, which is an advocate for students. I just really believe in advocacy and advocating for people who, for marginalized communities and students of color and just underrepresented students in general. And so I am really passionate about that work and see my primary role as an advocate. I'm also a big sister. I'm the oldest of 7 children, and so I have 6 younger siblings, and that's a big part of me and my life, and something that is important to me. All my siblings are like mini me's, or at least that's what I'm trying to mold them to be. And one of my proudest moments as a big sister is that my little brother, who is a rising sophomore at Jackson State University, recently became a resident advisor. So I'm raising him to be a student affairs professional like me. So it's one of my proudest moments. I'm also a podcaster, and that's actually how I came across Alante with Black in Grad School. And I co-host a podcast called School and Life. That's at SCHOOLIN Life Pod. We are a weekly podcast, and our tagline is that we talk about life, love, and occasionally libations. I co-host that podcast with a fellow Ph.D. Her degree is in clinical psychology, and her name is Marcy Sims. Really, it's a release valve for me, a way to sort of share my random musings with the world, and I really it's therapeutic, honestly, for me. It's a way to be honest and truthful and share my truth, and I really love it. So if you've never heard of School and Life and you want to check it out, definitely do that. You can follow us on social at School and Life Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And the reason why you're here today and talking to me primarily is because I am also a graduate faculty member in the College of Education at Penn State University. I teach higher education and student college personnel programs, courses at the university, and I'm actually teaching this summer. So I have my experience from being a master's degree student and a doctoral student, and also my experience as a graduate faculty member. So today we're going to spend a lot of time talking about values, and you might be thinking, I didn't anticipate having a conversation about values when I'm trying to think about how to be successful in graduate school. But from my own experience and my experience as a faculty member, I really do believe that there are some core values that successful graduate students have. And those values are integrity, respect, responsibility, discovery, excellence, and community. And it's these 6 values that really are showcased when a student is being successful. I'll show some integrity and cite my sources that these are also values that the university that I work for has acknowledged as values that are core to the way that the university approaches its work. And so one of the things I really love about my job and the way that I approach my work is that, I work for an institution that really values that has core values that are in many ways aligned with my own. And that is something that I'm really proud of. And, as future people who might be working in higher education or industry, as an aside note, I do encourage you to think about what that organization's values are and make sure that you're only working for organizations that are aligned with your own. So that's just sort of a tidbit outside of what we're going to talk about today. Kind of skipped ahead there. Sorry about that. So I think one of the things that I'd like for you to think about is imagine if by employing a set of core values, you could have a collaborative, impactful, and transformative experience with each professor throughout your program. Imagine if you approached every course as an opportunity for you to grow and learn, and that you would have, every class would be an impactful experience. There wouldn't be any class that doesn't add value to your life and the way you approach your work. Imagine if that was true. Imagine if your faculty members felt the same. I definitely think that this is what I'm hoping that you'll get out of today's conversation, that you will have the tools and the values to be able to do your part of creating that type of experience for yourself, and that your faculty members will pick up on that, and that they will see that as you engaging them in true academic work. So I do think that that is important, and I hope that you'll keep that imagination, that imaginative idea of employing a set of core values can really transform your experience. So the first value I really want to talk about is integrity. And this is one that I feel like everyone, beats the drum about, the value of having some type of acting with integrity and honesty. Almost every university has some type of honor code and has some high academic, professional, and ethical standards. And I think that, really making sure that you are aware of the university academic integrity policy and that you are following it is really integral, important information as you approach being successful in graduate school. Not successfully knowing and adhering to the university's academic integrity policy can easily have you kicked out of graduate school. So for me, this one is really foundational. And at the graduate level, I didn't know is no longer an acceptable excuse for not doing the right thing. And that takes me right to the next thing, which is avoiding excuses. There really should not be a space where you can say like, oh, I didn't know that, or I wasn't aware of what the expectation is, or how was I supposed to know that, or you didn't tell us that. It's so critically important that you approach your faculty and even your peers in class without excuse, and that you avoid, the run of the mill, oh, I forgot, like, oh, I didn't really know what the expectation was, as a graduate student. I think that we expect, and we'll talk about this more, the sort of idea of respect and responsibility, and a big part of having integrity and acting in integrity is avoiding excuses. And then just really thinking about how to make ethical decisions. And I think this is one that everyone sort of feels like they know about, but they don't always employ. And this can be anything from, knowing that there is, a test bank and avoiding utilizing it or entangling with people who are utilizing it. making ethical decisions about lab procedures if you're in the sciences or in STEM and you work in labs, and making ethical decisions about the data that you collect from your subjects. There's just so many choices that you'll make throughout your profession. And if you, as a graduate student, don't start the goal of making ethical decisions, it will follow you in your career. I definitely have colleagues that, you know, when we get together at some of our big national conferences, there's colleagues that we talk about, and not to be messy and catty, but to say that we know that those are folks who don't have a ton of integrity. They've not displayed integral behavior throughout their career, and it probably started when they were a graduate student, and now everybody knows about it. And there's a lack of respect for those professionals because of it. So definitely something to consider. You know, making sure that you're making those ethical decisions, and that, you know, when you see something, say something. And I know particularly people of color have a strong no snitch culture, but I do think that there is, you want to build a reputation that you're gonna go high when they go low, right? Shout out to our forever First Lady, Michelle Obama. We want to make sure that that is how we're being seen. And I definitely think that a big part of that is making ethical decisions. So let's talk about respect. And really, respect is defined as respecting and honoring the dignity of each person, embracing civil discourse, and fostering a diverse and inclusive community. And I think that the cornerstone of respect is recognizing and respecting the diversity within your community. And I know that I'm talking to a group of, you know, people of color. And so you might feel like, you know, absolutely, like I recognize my own diversity in my own life. And I respect that. But I also think it's about respecting the diversity within your community. And when I say respecting the diversity in your community, that means respecting and understanding the fact that not everyone is as inclusive or aware of the value of diversity as you are. And that goes for your faculty members, that might go for your peers in class. And that diversity could be age, race, gender, sexual orientation, ability, socioeconomic status, and so much more. And so I think when it comes to respect, it's important that you recognize that everyone may not be, quote unquote, as woke as you. They may not come from the same place of awareness about their privilege or about their majority or minority status. And you have to recognize that and respect that, respect the knowledge of that. You don't have to respect their dissenting decisions or opinions. I've definitely been a part of classes as a graduate student where I had colleagues who did not respect me or my humanity. And they would voice that in the things that they would bring up in class, and challenging me publicly about, you know, my knowledge or skills related to something. But I recognized that in them, and I was respectful that I knew either not to engage them or engage them in a way that would not be harmful to me. And so I do think that there's something of value in really understanding, recognizing the diversity in your community and respecting that. And then also embracing civil discourse. And I'll be honest, this is one that's really challenging for me. As a faculty member, you know, I have a set of values, my own personal values, you know, beliefs, systems that I come into a classroom with. And oftentimes students will challenge that. And I embrace the challenge, but I'm still a person, right? I'm still a human. I still have feelings. I know that a lot of people are on team no feelings, but I have them. And so it can be a challenge sometimes to embrace civil discourse, to embrace students who are questioning or pushing back on things that I think are foundational. So for example, you know, if I'm teaching a course on the history of higher education in the United States, and I'm talking about the impact that affirmative action policies have had on increasing access to higher education for underrepresented communities, and I have a student who vehemently challenges that assertion and talks about how affirmative action is discriminatory, it can be really hard for me to embrace that civil discourse and to sort of talk to that, have an engaging conversation with that student without, sort of pulling my professor card, right? But I do think that it is so critically important to be mindful of embracing civil discourse. I think that it's important to keep that civil discourse. Sometimes it can be, you can protect yourself by making sure that you keep that civil discourse in the course. Don't always take that home with you. I know that sometimes you can, go home to your partner or to your girlfriend, like, oh my God, I can't believe what, Billy said in class today. Like, he tripping, he like doesn't even believe these foundational truths about this, theory or, the science. But sometimes just keeping that in class means that you can create spaces in class where you can have that civil discourse, and outside of class, you can have safe space. And I do still, even though I know we're as academicians, we're moving away from safe space sometimes and talking about brave space. But I do think particularly people of color, particularly women of color, there's a lot of value in creating spaces where you do feel safe and where you feel there's some harbor. And I encourage you to think about that as you're trying to embrace civil discourse. And then also when it comes to respect, I do think that it's important to only escalate when appropriate. And I want to talk a little bit about this because I know that this can kind of be controversial feedback. But as a faculty member, I always want the benefit of the doubt for my students, and I will always give them the benefit of the doubt. If you turn in a paper, you can expect in my classes to get that back within 7 days. If you email me, you can expect to get a response within 48 hours. If you go to the dean after 12 hours of me emailing you and saying, Dr. Adams isn't responsive, I feel like I haven't heard from her, she doesn't care about students, like, what? Like, excuse me? That's an inappropriate escalation. Like, it's like 12 hours. Like, I could have been asleep. I could have been doing anything. I could have just been living my best life, right? Like, I set clear expectations with students at the beginning of my courses. And I ask them to set expectations of me. And we work on a contract through the syllabus to have shared expectations. If I'm not meeting those shared expectations, I expect them to escalate, but only then, right? And so I do think that it's important, an important note about respect for graduate students and how you can show your respect for your faculty members is escalating, but only when appropriate. If it's, if you feel like you should have got an A on a paper and you got a B, I understand how in graduate school, like a B is, A's is really, the only acceptable piece or only acceptable grade, but challenge your faculty member first before going to the chancellor, right? Like, escalate appropriately. When it comes to things like sexual assault, relationship bias, or relationship violence, discrimination, and bias, that's when you escalate immediately. That causes for immediate escalation. There is no reason to hesitate. If you're experiencing that in the classroom, from a peer, from the faculty member, you should respect yourself to escalate immediately. But when it comes to course concerns, I encourage you to give your faculty members the benefit of the doubt. That will show that you are respecting them and build better relationships with them going forward. Responsibility. So when it comes to graduate school, there's a lot of shared responsibility, responsibility of learning, responsibility of expectations throughout. And it is really true that graduate students and graduate faculty often have very, there can be a lot of murky middle when it comes to responsibility. Graduate students often feel like their graduate faculty are responsible for things that they may not be responsible for. And graduate faculty often put a lot of pressure on graduate students, particularly graduate assistants or TAs, about who is responsible for what. And so I definitely encourage you to think about what responsibility means. And here, the definition that we're going to use is around acting responsible and being accountable for our decisions, our actions, and their consequences. And so one of the things that I think is really important as we talk about responsibility is this idea that you should be prepared to inform relevant faculty of potential and or existing conflicts and work towards a resolution. And I want to point out some key words in this definition. So first is inform relevant faculty. Right? So if you have a death in your family, Not every faculty member in the department needs to know about that. Perhaps your advisor needs to know, perhaps the faculty who are teaching your classes need to know, but you don't need to send out an email to the full listserv to let them know about this tragic event. You may feel like everyone cares because this is important to you, and it's not to diminish what you are experiencing, but not everyone may care, and it may have you coming off as emotional or temperamental or, you know, oversharing when you share things that are not relevant with everybody. So make sure that you're informing relevant faculty. Next, of potential and existing conflicts, right? So let's say you are pregnant, 8 months pregnant when you start the course in August. You might want to share that with your faculty member and let them know that while I do not have, am not currently in labor or do not have an infant child, I expect to have one in 6 weeks. Like that is a potential conflict with your ability to successfully complete your work. You want to point that out, that this is an important and something that your faculty members should be knowledgeable of. You can even provide additional details if, again, if relevant to relevant people. So, for example, this is a high-risk pregnancy, and I'm expecting to be, you know, out for this period of time, or, you know, I already have these related accommodations with the Disability Services Office. You know, here are the accommodations that I have, and then working towards a resolution, right? So, inform relevant people of potential and existing conflicts, and then working towards a resolution. So, really, this is a lot about coming with a plan. So, I'm going to be out for this amount of time. This is how I plan to make up the work. Do you have any feedback about it? Making sure that you give the faculty members an opportunity to say, oh, actually, that's not going to work for me, sis, is really important. Because while you should come with a resolution, I, as a faculty member, often have the opportunity to say, you know, honestly, that's not going to work for this class. There's too much group work. You know, this paper has to be turned in succession, and that's not going to work. And, you know, we might have to work through that. But it's not helpful for me as a faculty member if you say, oh, well, I have to travel for work, so I'm not going to be able to be in class for these 2 days, and I'm not going to get that paper turned in on time. You know, period, send email. That's not helpful to me. I need you to work towards a resolution, and that's something that we can work on together. I also encourage graduate students to seek student support services beyond your professor and faculty advisor. At this point in how our nation does higher education, there are counseling and psychological services office. There's gender equity centers. There's LGBTQA centers. There's African-American student centers and Pan-African student centers. There's recreation services and parents programs. And, you know, there are so many support services at most institutions. So make sure that you're seeking out support services beyond the ones that your professor and your faculty advisor might know about. Do the work to identify those student affairs offices at your university and figure out what they have to offer you. They should be giving you something. You are paying a lot in tuition. There should be something more than just, you know, teaching and learning. So make sure that you're getting something out of that, particularly if you're a graduate assistant or a TA. There's probably clubs and organizations that are connected with TAs and graduate assistants that can help you think about, you know, how to bolster your success. There might be groups where you guys can collectively bargain for something. So make sure that you're seeking out those support services. And if there's something that you need that the university doesn't offer, hey, say you need a childcare subsidy because you are a graduate student with children and you'd like a discount at your daycare, advocate for yourself. But you don't necessarily have to do that with your faculty advisor. There are avenues for that. And I absolutely encourage you to look out for those. If they don't exist, figure out a way that you can get to them. And then finally, just know that you bear the primary responsibility for your success. Your faculty are there to teach you, to train you, to make sure that you are going to be a professional or a fellow academician. But you are primarily responsible for your success. And that's a cornerstone of graduate school that you may not have encountered in undergrad or in primary school. Next, we're going to talk about discovery. And I think that this is the one that is kind of more mystifying for people when I talk about this value. Discovery is all about seeking and creating new knowledge and understanding fostering creativity and innovation, really for the benefit of our communities, our society, and for the greater environment. And I do think that, you know, when it comes to discovery, as a graduate student, you should absolutely be advancing thoughtful questions. When you come to class, I should be hearing, you know, Dr. Adams, yeah, I was really fascinated by the work of George Kuhn in chapter 2 of our text this week. I thought that his points on X, Y, and Z were revolutionary. They also reminded me of the work of X, Y, and Z author that I read when I was an undergrad, and I'm really excited to do more research on the following in our research paper at the end of the semester. Every question that you ask me, every conversation that we have should be thoughtful. That doesn't mean that you have to come in like a robot, right? Like, you don't have to be like, you know, with your glasses on the tip of your nose, but you absolutely should approach me with thoughtful questions. And I think that particularly this is important for graduate students who might be taking classes online or might have some like online discussion boards as part of their program. It can be really easy to phone it in online. Like, oh yeah, I agree with Tom, you know, like, but you want to make sure that you are being really thoughtful in the way that you advance questions, being really thoughtful in the way that you engage your peers and your professors. And in order to be thoughtful, I encourage you to think about how you can start every course with, I'm hoping to learn X in this course to help solve X problem. And I guess I should have put X and Y, but you get the point. Basically, you should approach, you know, your chemical engineering course with, I'm hoping to learn about, you know, biometrics in this course in order to solve, you know, water receding issues in Cambodia in this course, right? Every course should be like that. And if we go back to that imagine piece, if you imagine that every course is going to have some super high impact, you'll open yourself up to the discovery of that in every engagement. I encourage you to engage with scholarship outside of your discipline. I think what's exciting about graduate school is that you get to dive deep into something. My doctoral degree, again, is in higher education and administration. So when I tell y'all I can spit, you know, off the top of my head, random theories about student engagement or random theories about how socioeconomic status affects degree attainment in higher education, random facts and figures about that. But I also need to know about psychology. I also need to know about sociology. I also need to know about, you know, things like town and gown relationships. Civic engagement and civil discourse. I need to know about the law because a lot of the law impacts higher education. I need to know about architecture and how buildings are built and why they matter and how they support or detract from student engagement. I need to engage with scholarship outside of my discipline to be successful. And I think that this is advice that I will give you that I think a lot of other people won't. They'll tell you, like, you know, just focus on your discipline, you know, do whatever you got to do to graduate. And there's a lot of value in completion, not perfection, but you are going to complete something that isn't going to add value to the world, which goes to my next piece around creating new knowledge, if you don't do things outside of your discipline. Make sure that you're reading other academic journals, that you're talking to friends in other programs. Don't just connect with people that you know and that know your discipline. Connect with other people, because that's going to make sure that you impact the world in significant ways. And the last thing that I want to say around discovery is really seek for opportunities to create new knowledge. I know sometimes graduate school can just feel like let me get through these 12, 15, 25 courses and, you know, have this piece of paper so that I can advance my career. And that is important work. And I'm, you know, all about the money. But if there's an opportunity for you to do some graduate research with a faculty member, if there's an opportunity for you to explore something more deeply in a way that you can create new knowledge, that you can put something new in the space, absolutely think about how you can do that. Think about, you know, and I consider these folks as scholars, but think about, you know, folks like at the PBG on Twitter and her work in creating Black Girl Magic. Or think about folks like the woman who created the Me Too movement. They created new knowledge. They created new spaces, new ways to engage in scholarship. Think about the author who wrote "Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria?" We know that Black kids sit together in the cafeteria. These are not new things that happen, but these were academicians, scholars who explored phenomenons and then created new knowledge about why it was happening. So I really encourage you to think about how you can create new knowledge, how you can try new things, how you can share something with the world that no one else can share. And there's going to be those things because there's you and no one else can share things like you can share them. So next we're going to talk about excellence. And this is one of my favorite things to talk about, but because particularly for Black graduate students, we know all about Black excellence, right? We know that we have a standard to uphold and that there is an expectation that we not only show up, but we show out. And so I want to encourage you in that spirit of Black excellence in particular to show up like a paraprofessional. I look at my graduate students as, part professionals, as people who are showing up and are going to be my peers, in a few short years. And so my expectation is that you show up like a paraprofessional, that you show up dressed like a paraprofessional, regardless of if, they say you can wear leggings or jeans or whatever. My expectation, and I encourage you to take this along with your Black excellence, is that you show up dressed like a professional. And that might mean that you show up dressed better than the professionals that you work with. But I always encourage my graduate assistants, my TAs, and even my graduate students in class to show up looking like a professional. And it's not just the looking the part, but also a professional is going to read the text before they come to class. A professional is going to have read some of the additional texts that were suggested but maybe not required. A paraprofessional is going to have read a book review. They're going to be up on the news. So if we talk about current events in today's class, they're going to be relatively knowledgeable. A paraprofessional is going to be well-spoken. A paraprofessional is going to contribute to the knowledge in the field. So show up like a paraprofessional. And I think that is truly walking in excellence. I also encourage students to proactively improve research and scholarship skills and seek continuous improvement. You should be getting better as your program goes along. You should be improving as your program goes along. I know in my graduate classes, I can be a really harsh grader on those early assignments. So don't get discouraged. You receive a paper back from me and you're like, why did I get an 8 out of 20? Like, why is this paper all marked up? Like, why did I get full points? Because I'm trying to train you to be excellent. This was okay, but this wasn't good. And good would be undergraduate level. I expect excellence. So proactively seek out opportunities to improve your research and scholarship skills. Don't take those early knocks as you aren't good enough or you don't know how to do it. And look for opportunities to improve. And when you have them, improve. Like, make sure that you are making those improvements. And to this piece, one of the ways that I think that it's you can be excellent is by taking advantage of your librarians. When I tell y'all the library does not get enough shine, it does not get enough shine. There is so much knowledge in the library, and there's so much knowledge that you can gain from research librarians. At this point, at most universities, they have specific librarians per discipline. So there will be a research librarian for your earth and mineral sciences degree, for your homeland security degree, for your sociology degree, for your African American studies degree. There's going to be specific librarians that all they do is research that stuff, and they're waiting for you or your peers to come and talk to them about it so they can share with you articles or how to set up this paper or how to cite these sources. So I strongly encourage you to hit up those research librarians. They are so knowledgeable, and they can be clutch too. Like, oh, I read this, I heard this, somebody said something about this. Can you help me find this? They are sleuthers. Like literally can come up with anything. So I encourage you to reach out to them. And then another piece about excellence is just know that I can tell the difference, right? So I can tell when you're slacking. I can tell when you're half-assing your work, excuse my language. I can tell when you're not giving it your best effort. I can tell when you wrote this the night before. With certain software, I can tell when you're plagiarizing this entire paper. I can tell. So know that I can tell and act like I can tell. Don't not be excellent. Be excellent, because you can. You got this far. You got into the graduate program. I have full faith that you can do this work. I will challenge you as your faculty member. And when I'm challenging you, that means that I care. That means that I'm invested holistically in your success. But know that I can tell the difference. And I can tell when you're doing your best and you're just struggling versus when you're not doing your best and you're phoning it in. And then finally, community. And this is one of the ones that I'm really thrilled to be here and having this conversation with you all, because I think that this is a space where we can build community. Twitter handles and Twitter communities like Black in Grad School and Trying to Grad, Woke in STEM, and even School in Life as a podcast being hosted by two Ph.Ds. We are communities of scholars, of people that you can connect with. And I really believe in building community and having a squad, if you will, as you go through graduate school. And that squad might be virtual. That squad might be, at a distance. But I encourage you to think about how you can build a squad, whether it's in person through your program or virtually. And one of the things that I want to talk about when it comes to building community is the sort of types of communities that you should be building and what that means. So one of the things that I think is true when it comes to sort of this idea of building community is that a lot of times when we talk about this, and I'll be honest to say that I just did this as well, is that like I'm talking about building POC communities and talking about finding your tribe and connecting with people. And I think that is so important, because I think that there is something about having a shared experience with people who look like you that adds so much value to your life and can really be about community. But I do think that it's important to find allies and accomplices inside and outside of your department. And what I mean by that is that an ally will most likely engage in activism by standing with you and helping you share the important messages and the important causes that you are trying to voice, right? So an ally is the person who you will vent to and they'll be like, yeah, girl, let's go to the dean together. Or they'll walk beside you at the march, or they'll help you celebrate your wins. When you get that A on that first research paper, you need allies, people that are going to be there right with you, helping you celebrate your wins and engaging in activism right by your side. But you also need accomplices. An accomplice is more focused on dismantling the structures that oppress you, and work to work with the stakeholders, with the decision makers to push back against anything that might be preventing you from being successful. And you need allies and accomplices. The accomplices might be your faculty advisor, right? Who's going to say, hey, this new graduate policy that the university is trying to push through is really going to be discriminatory against, our students in this program for this reason. Or, hey, I know that we're giving out, research grants, and I really want to make sure that I nominate, this student for that, because I know how hard she's been working, in this, on this work. You need allies and accomplices, because, and the next point about community is that you need to know that many of the decisions about your career will happen when you're not in the room. And so it's so critically important that you build those relationships with both, because you're not going to be in every room when things get brought up. You're not always going to be there when somebody is calling your name or nominating you for something, or, you know, looking for somebody to be on that search committee, or looking for somebody to help, you know, lead a student movement. And so know that you need both. And this is unfortunate but true, is that you need allies and accomplices that are not people of color, because unfortunately we're not always in the rooms where the decisions get made. And so think strategically about your mentors, about your allies, about your accomplices, and make sure that they are from across a spectrum of races, ethnicities, gender identities, socioeconomic statuses, and positions within the university and within your field, so that there can be lots of people in lots of rooms to advocate for you. Because if you only take on mentors, allies, and accomplishments that are people of color, women of color, not only are we already often burdened with a lot of more work and responsibilities than our white counterparts, but they may not be in the rooms that you need them to be in. And I know that can be tough, especially if you've built some relationships with some of those folks, but I do encourage you to diversify that. And also it gives you an opportunity to learn from a community of scholars that don't necessarily look like you. So I want to pause there and open it up for questions. Tell me, what questions can I answer for you to better help you prepare for your success as a graduate student? And before I open it up, I do want to thank Strengths Not Strikes team and the Summit sponsors. I'm really thrilled to be here and be able to have these conversations. And I really appreciate you all taking the time to talk with me and have this conversation this evening. So go ahead and type your questions into the chat box if you're on social. Please be sure to share your questions. I think you can at School and Life Pod, that's at SCHOLIN Life Pod, or you can Black and Grad School, that's at BLKIN Grad School, and we'll see those questions and can ask them aloud.
Sorry. I was still live tweeting. Here are a couple of questions that we got, Dr. Ashley. Number one, thank you. That was, oh my gosh, so great. You had so many really amazing gems in there. So can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. The first question was, how does one ask these questions? You were speaking about, you know, the excuse of like, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to do that, or I didn't know that. How does one ask that question and figure those things out that might be kind of like unknown rules for grad school without coming off, I guess, in the exact, leaving that bad impression that might be left if you didn't ask in the first place? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, absolutely. So like, how do you know what you don't know? Like, how do you ask questions without, quote unquote, seeming like, you know, ignorant or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I think you should do is ask, like, you can ask me, right? Like, you can just, you know, you could ask somebody else that went to grad school. You know, if it's general questions about like, how do I navigate this? Or like, how do I find out about like research? Or like, how do I learn how to cite? Like, I feel like I did some of it in undergrad, but I feel like the level is higher now. Like, how do I learn about that? Like, ask somebody else that went to graduate school. Again, it's a lot of it is about, one of the important ways to build relationships with your faculty in class, and then even with, you know, other like your faculty advisor and then faculty who are teaching your classes, is to come in with some level of knowledge, because I am going to expect that you know something. And so for some of those questions, just ask your community, like ask your tribe, ask on Twitter, you know, follow these places of people who are in this community, and they can share at least a baseline knowledge. That way, once you go to your faculty member, you'll have at least some decorum of knowledge, right? If it's something that's discipline specific, or like a question about the syllabus, don't be afraid to ask. I do expect my students to have read the syllabus, but if you read it and you're like, I have a question about this, then ask me, because I want to know, and I want to help you. I'm invested in your success, especially at the graduate level. Like I said, you're a paraprofessional. If you're not successful, I'm not successful. So ask. I think that is like really critically important. Ask your community, right? Like ask those allies, ask those accomplices. You know, if you don't have those yet, develop community online and ask there. And then if it's something more specific, don't be afraid to ask your faculty advisor or the faculty in your class. But make sure you read that syllabus first, so that you have some baseline knowledge.
Awesome. Okay, so the second question was, it was kind of a statement, but really wanting some insight from you, is like, I don't know how to confront others about it without seeming confrontational or passionate about the importance of integrity in the work we do. Or just like that, and also embracing that civil discourse without taking it personally or being confrontational.
Yes. Oh, that is such a good question. And this is tough for me, because I think that there's two answers to this. The first part is around integrity. So I think you have to have integrity, you have to have integrity in almost all of your decisions, right? You have to display integrity as you sort of live your life out as a student, as a mother, as a parent, as a graduate student, whatever. Like you have to have integrity all the time. Integrity isn't something you can turn off and turn on. So one of the things that I think that if you're having trouble, like saying to your peers, like, we need to approach our work with integrity, one of the ways that you can demonstrate that, right, or model that, is making sure that they see you as somebody who has integrity in all of your decision making, that you approach your interactions with them and your interactions with life with integrity. So part of it is modeling, to me, right? Like just modeling being an integral person, like a person who has integrity. The other piece to that is that calling them out on the least of things, right? So it's hard to call somebody out like once they've like completely pulled the paper off the internet and like turned it in. Like, but when you see them just like talking about stuff in class or on a discussion board and it's not cited, you can be like, oh, where'd you get that from? Like, oh, like who talks? Like, is there other scholars that talk about that? Or like, kind of calling them out on the least of things. So it builds up a culture of integrity amongst your graduate student peers. So that's that part of it. When it comes to civil discourse, this is honestly something that I have not figured out, even in my role as an administrator. So in addition to being a graduate faculty member, I'm also the director of student affairs. And, I'm sometimes confronted with folks who just are not engaging me in a way that is civil. In my classes, students are saying things that, to me, right, aren't civil. And this is something that I still, I navigate. It's a daily navigation. It's a daily checking myself, checking my privilege, right? Recognizing that there are things that I probably think are foundational that to other people are not. And that never means discounting your humanity, but it also means recognizing your privilege. And even as I describe myself, right, as like a young presenting Black, straight woman who's able-bodied, I do have privileges. Like my able-bodiedness is a privilege. My non-queer identity, in many communities is a privilege. And so I have to recognize my own privileges and recognize that even some of the ways in which I engage people, particularly in marginalized communities where I am a majority, might not always seem civil to them. So recognizing my own humanity helps. And then the other piece is recognizing that all discourse is not civil, and knowing when to like give them a blank stare and walk away is also critical to my arsenal of managing those kind of engagements.
Cool. I love that. I think that's very true. We often feel kind of like, I don't know what I was going to say. I'm not even going to say it anymore, but I agree. All right. So there was another question. How do you find accomplices? I think I have a lot of allies, but not accomplices.
Yes. Okay. So this is the thing about accomplices. You can't go to somebody and be like, hey, can you be my accomplice? Like, I need you. So how I would approach this is like, I do the, like, hey, I'd love to grab lunch with you sometime next month, right? And I'm still to this day, at this point in my career, gathering up accomplices all the time. Typically, accomplices need to be in positions that are not, they need to typically be like maybe outside of, not necessarily outside of your department, but like maybe tangential to your department. You might want to have one in, but you might want to have one that's like tangential, like that's in a similar department or like within your college, but not necessarily in your program, right? So, and I recommend like associate deans or administrators, like senior level administrators who maybe have influence over your program, but don't necessarily like, they're not going to be like necessarily teaching every class, but they might have relationships with your faculty member outside of like the classroom. So, and so you gotta look at like maybe look at an org chart, right? And figure out like what those relationships are, or just watch, like in your first semester, just watch it, like see who talks to who's in meetings with who, like figure that out. And then like reach out to people and say, hey, I'd love to have lunch with you next month. Can you like, connect me with your administrative assistant and, see if I can just find some time on your calendar. I just really like to talk to you about, my, educational and sort of career related goals and, learn more from you about how you approach your work. And using that phrase, like everybody loves to talk about themselves. So if you just ever like reach out to somebody and say, like, I'd love to talk to you about how you approach your work, they're like all in. So then use that lunch strategically to talk a little bit about yourself, but mostly let them talk about themselves. And then at the end of it, say, this has been a really transformative conversation. Like, I'm so glad that we had this. I wanted to remind you that, as I go throughout my program, I'm really interested in this. So, if any of these opportunities come up, or if there's an opportunity for you, to like advocate on my behalf, like definitely, don't hesitate to put my name in the hat. Like, I'm really open to lots of opportunities. And you kind of like leave it up to like, say to them, like, I'm interested in these 3 things or these 2 things. So, if there's opportunities that come up, like definitely don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'd love to connect it, in the future. And then every 3 months, have it on your calendar to send them an email. Hey, how are you? Pay attention to what they do. I saw that presentation that you did. Wow, that was really phenomenal. I'm so glad that, you're advocating, for students or for this research, I want to let you know I'm doing these 3 things. Looking forward to connecting with you this summer, when we both have some downtime, right? So you sort of plan that out, and I know that it'll reap benefits. In my own career, I went up to someone in the field who I admire. He was a white man, probably 30 years my senior. And I've been following his work in the field for a number of years. I walked up to him after a presentation and I said, hi, Dr. So-and-so. I wanted to introduce myself. This is who I am. This is where I'm at in my career. And I approached him on like a mentoring tip. So I said, I wanted to know if you ever mentor mid-level professionals. And he said, no. And I said, well, would you consider it? And he was like, well, why? Like, what do you want? What are you looking for? And I told him. And so he said, yeah, I'll consider. Here's my card, email my administrative assistant. She'll set up something. Great. So I emailed this administrative assistant. She set up something for the next month. We talked over the phone because this was at a distance. I wasn't living near him at the time. So I couldn't do the lunch thing. So we set up a time. He asked me about my work and my resume. He pointed out some spaces where, like, you got some gaps in your resume. You need to shore up this. You need to shore up this. You need to shore up this. Okay, thank you for that feedback. I look forward to connecting with you in the future. 2 months later, he contacted me and said, one of my colleagues is chairing a search committee, and I think that you should apply. That's the job that I have today, 2.5 years later. So this accomplice space really works. And I think that a little bit of it is getting beyond that mentoring piece, because I think a lot of people talk about mentoring. And I'm not saying mentoring is bad. I don't think it's bad. But I think it's less about mentoring and more about accomplices, people that are in rooms that you aren't, that can advocate for you when you're not there. Not just helping you be better, but helping the environment be better, pushing back against things that would impede your success otherwise.
Powerful, powerful. I have myself on mute. I am looking to see if there are any more questions. I don't see any. A lot of people agreed with the librarian point. Renee said they are so great. I love the librarian in my post-bac. She was a lifesaver, and I agreed. I think we talked about the confrontation, and you provided some really great insight. And I think that step-by-step you just provided about accomplices, I think was really, really on point, and information I even needed, I asked as well. That was a question that I had. But I think that was it for questions. Thank you so much, Dr. Ashley. This was amazing.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I am so thrilled to be in this space and have this conversation with you all. You can definitely connect with me professionally on LinkedIn. It's Dr. Ashley A. Adams, all 3 A's. So it's spelled conventionally, so easy to connect with me there. And then on a more, sort of fun or engaging tip, you can absolutely connect with me at School and Life Pod. You can email us at schoolandlifepod@gmail.com. And we release the podcast on Tuesday, so there's a brand new episode up if you want to catch that. We talked about things you should do by the time you're 35, but it was not a checklist. It was a hilarious episode of ridiculous things that people say you should do that you shouldn't focus those milestones after. So feel free to check that out. And thanks again for having me. It was a real pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.